You know that moment when someone starts telling you what they're going through, and before they even finish, you've already stepped into solution mode. Your mind begins connecting the dots, thinking ahead, trying to make it better before things even fully unfold. You're not just listening, you're already working on the answer. Most people would look at that and say it's just you being helpful, maybe even thoughtful. But here's what makes this interesting. Psychology suggests it's not always just about helping, and once you start noticing the difference, it quietly changes how you see yourself in those moments. Researchers have been paying attention to this pattern for a long time, not just in close relationships, but in everyday interactions. And what they found is that it usually begins in a way that's almost invisible. It doesn't feel like pressure or obligation. It feels like instinct. Someone feels overwhelmed, and something in you responds immediately. There's no pause, no hesitation, no internal debate. You just step in. It feels natural, like part of your personality, like something you've always done without thinking twice about it. But here's where things start to separate in a way most people don't realize. There are actually two very different experiences that look almost identical from the outside. There's supporting someone, and then there's feeling responsible for someone. Supporting is grounded and steady. You listen, you care, you stay present, but you understand that their emotions belong to them. Responsibility feels different. It creates a subtle internal shift where their stress begins to feel like something you need to solve, almost like it's been placed on your shoulders without being asked. And this is where it gets psychologically interesting, because for a lot of people, that pattern didn't just appear randomly. It was learned, often very early on, in environments where emotional tension needed to be managed quickly, where conflict had to be softened, where stability depended on someone noticing what was wrong before it became too much. So your brain adapted. It became highly sensitive to emotional changes. It learned to scan, to anticipate, to step in before things escalated. Over time, that response stopped feeling like something you do and started feeling like who you are. That's where the deeper layer begins to form. You start associating being helpful with being valued, and being needed with being important. Without even realizing it, your sense of worth becomes quietly tied to how much you can fix. So when someone is struggling, it doesn't just feel like an opportunity to help, it feels like something you're supposed to handle, something that confirms your place in the relationship, something that reassures you that you matter in that moment. Now look, this doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. In fact, people who naturally take on the fixer role are often incredibly emotionally aware. They notice subtle shifts in tone, in energy, in behavior. They understand people in ways that others might overlook. But here's the part that often goes unnoticed. That same awareness can become mentally exhausting because you're not just listening anymore. You're analyzing, predicting, managing outcomes, and running quiet simulations in your mind about what might go wrong and how to prevent it before it even happens. Psychologists often connect this to something called cognitive load, which is basically the amount of mental effort your brain is carrying at any given time. And when you're constantly trying to fix things, your mind ends up carrying far more than it needs to. Not just your own thoughts and emotions, but fragments of everyone else's as well. Their problems, their worries, their outcomes. And a lot of that weight comes from things that were never yours to carry in the first place, even though it feels like it is. Here's where things become a bit counterintuitive. Fixing someone's problem doesn't always reduce stress. Sometimes it actually keeps it going, because instead of letting emotions move naturally, you step in too early and take over the process. You try to organize something that might not need organizing yet, and now your brain stays engaged long after the conversation is over. You replay it, adjust it, think about what else you could do, what else you should have said, how to make sure everything turns out okay. And something subtle starts to happen over time. People begin to expect that version of you, the one who always knows what to say, the one who always has a solution ready, the one who can hold everything together when things feel uncertain. So even when you don't feel like fixing anything, you feel pulled into it anyway, almost like it's your role, your responsibility, something you can't easily step away from without feeling like you're letting someone down. And honestly, this is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. When you're always the fixer, you don't always get to just be human. You don't get to be unsure or confused or emotionally overwhelmed in the same way others do, because people are used to you being the steady one, the one who understands, the one who stabilizes, the one who makes things better. And over time, that creates a quiet imbalance that's easy to miss. You end up deeply involved in other people's inner worlds, but not many people are invited into yours. So even though you're constantly connecting, parts of you remain unseen, not in an obvious way, but in a quiet, subtle way that builds over time. And that can create a kind of loneliness that's difficult to explain, because on the surface, it looks like you're surrounded by connection. If this feels familiar, just stay with me for a moment, because this isn't about labeling the behavior as good or bad. It's about understanding what's actually happening underneath it. When you look at emotional regulation research, people who constantly fix aren't just helping others regulate their emotions, they're often regulating themselves. Seeing someone struggle creates a kind of internal discomfort, and fixing becomes a way to reduce that feeling, even if you're not fully aware of it. So in a way, you're not just solving their problem, you're also trying to restore your own sense of calm, and that's why it can feel urgent, like something needs to be handled immediately. But here's the shift that begins to change everything. People don't always need solutions. Sometimes they just need space to feel what they're feeling without it being organized, corrected, or repaired right away. If you've spent years being the fixer, that idea can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because doing nothing feels like you're not helping, even when your presence is actually what matters most. And this is where awareness starts to quietly reshape the pattern, not by forcing you to stop helping, but by allowing you to notice when helping turns into carrying and listening turns into managing. So if you've ever felt that quiet exhaustion after being there for everyone else, it may not mean you're doing too much. It may mean you've been doing it in a way that slowly takes from you without giving you space to exist outside of that role. And once you begin to see that clearly, something shifts. Not dramatically, but in small, almost unnoticeable ways that start to add up over time. You begin to pause before stepping in. You begin to listen without immediately solving. You begin to recognize that someone else's emotions can exist without you needing to take responsibility for them. And that awareness alone begins to reduce the weight your mind has been carrying for so long. If these ideas resonate with you, you might enjoy exploring more psychology like this. Subscribing helps this kind of content reach people who may need to hear it quietly at the right moment, just like you are right now. Because at the end of the day, being the fixer was never really just about helping others. It was a pattern your mind developed to create stability, to create value, and to create a sense of control in uncertain moments. And once you understand that, you stop judging it. You stop seeing it as something you need to fix about yourself, and instead, you begin to understand why it formed in the first place. And from that place, something subtle begins to change. You're still there for people, you still care deeply, but you're no longer carrying everything. You're no longer holding responsibility for things that were never yours. And that difference, even though it's quiet, is something you'll begin to notice in the smallest moments of your everyday life.